I want you to turn to Matthew chapter 10. We've had a phenomenal time, no question about that, and thank you, Chad, for the message tonight. Gave me real insight to what a stinking Nazarene is, so that was really helpful. I've always wondered, but that really helps me. So good to have that down. We've actually been on our normal Saturday night. If you aren't aware, we have a Saturday night service, a supper at 5, and a service afterwards each time on Saturday night. So it's a regular as well as Sunday morning. So this is our normal Sunday night or Saturday night service. And in that Saturday night service, we've been conducting a study in Matthew chapter 10. And I wanted to continue with that. We're looking tonight at verse 26, Matthew chapter 10, verse 26. So we've been walking through this discourse on a regular basis, and I know probably one of the frustrating things for some of you is to come into a conference like this, and everybody seems to be in the middle of a study, and you're just kind of jumping in to the middle of wherever they are studying, and Jeremiah, of course, in Revelation, and so forth. So that's happening again tonight. Matthew chapter 10, verse 26. Therefore do not fear them. Do not fear them. For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. Therefore do not fear them. For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. It's not fair, of course, to just take that statement. It's actually a slogan, a proverb, bumper sticker kind of thing that was common, a statement that could easily be made and would be made by philosophers, speakers, say to each other, there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, hidden that will not be known. Jesus is quoting something that they knew. It's not fair to talk about that without giving you the context. The context, of course, is back to chapter 9. Jesus has seen the harvest as plentiful in verse 39, and the laborers as few. He has called the disciples to prayer. Pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. In the middle of the prayer, he jumps up and says, your prayers have been answered. I'm calling you. And in chapter 10, verse 1, the 12 disciples are given power. They have power now to cast out unclean spirits, to heal all kinds of sickness, all kinds of disease. He's going to send them out into ministry. That becomes obvious in verse 2, for they've moved from disciples to apostles, the sent ones. So everything is dealing with these 12 disciples who've now become apostles that he is sending out. He lists the 12 apostles, so there's no question about who he's talking about in verse 3 and in verse 4. And then in verse 5, he begins the discourse. It's obvious what the subject is. That is, he's discussing the issue of ministry. What is ministry all about? I'm sending you out to ministry. He gives them specific instructions on ministry. He tells them where they're to go. He tells them who they're to go to. He tells them about situations they're going to get involved in and what they should do in those situations. And he goes on from verse 5 down through verse 15. In verse 16, there's a slight shift. He's moving in to give them a concept, give them a conceptual ministry that he's going to talk about. What is ministry all about? And he gives them a picture of ministry in verse 16. The picture of ministry he gives them is sheep in the midst of wolves. I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. And as we've talked here often, that's really discouraging to me. If he'd have said, I'm going to send you out as Superman in the midst of the evil of the world, I'd said, whoa, we can handle it. If he'd have said, I'll send you out as the beauty queen to be on TV and to marvelously sway the multitudes because they all want to be like you, then you could have said, well, hey, I'd love to fit into that. But he's saying, I'm going to send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. And he's the good shepherd. So you say, what on earth is going on? Because it's not, I'm going to send you out and there may be wolves. It's not, I'm going to send you out and be careful for the wolves. It's, I'm going to send you out. Oh, there's a pack of wolves. Go over there. I'm sending you in the midst of wolves. And what do wolves do to sheep? So you're going to get bit. And I'm giving you, it's not this may happen, it's not maybe, it's this is definitely, this is the picture of ministry. And if you say, well, that's imagery language, and indeed it is, then he turns right around and says, let's take it out of the imagery language, and he moves you into verse 17, and he begins to talk to you about persecution, which is religious persecution is where he starts. He says they will deliver you up to councils and scourge you in their synagogues. Religious persecution. And get ready, there's going to be religious persecution. If you minister in my name, you can expect religious persecution. In fact, it's not only that, verse 18, but it's political persecution. You will be brought before governors and kings for my sake as a testimony to them. And if that isn't enough, good night. Look at verse 21. There's going to be family persecution. For a brother will deliver up his brother to death. The father his child, and children rise up against parents, causing them to be put to death. This is serious. You are going to be hated for my name's sake. Persecution is going to take place. Now, as he thunders through this whole persecution element, he moves you into verse 24, 25, and 26. And the climax of it is this statement that's being made. Now, I want to give you a case for the passage. And I want to propose to you tonight, you're going to have to think with me now. I want to propose to you tonight, therefore do not fear. That the case of the passage all hangs on therefore. The Greek word therefore. Now, everyone here understands what the word therefore and how it's used. The word therefore is there to say what I've been telling you is the basis of what I'm now going to tell you. So after I've told you all that I've told you at this point, therefore, let me tell you this based upon that foundation. Now here's the difficulty of the passage. The difficulty is, what is the base over here? This is what I've told you. Therefore, this is what I'm going to tell you. What I'm going to tell you becomes very plain. There is nothing covered that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. But what is that based on? Now, if you go to the Bible scholars, they will all tell you, seemingly, most of them anyway, will tell you that the basis over here of what he's told them is persecution. I can understand that. Because after you've heard nothing but persecution from verse 16, verse 17, verse 18, then into verse 19, 20, then there's the family persecution, and then you're to get into the city and flee from there, and then all of this persecution, then you thunder into verse 26, therefore do not fear them. It sticks in your mind. The whole persecution idea is so strong, it literally sticks in your mind. I mean, how could you shake that? I'm going to be sheep in the midst of brother. I mean, it's going to be persecution. Well, I can't get that out of my head, man. So I come into verse 26 and say, oh, what he's talking about is persecution. The people who are going to persecute me. Don't be afraid. And why should I not be afraid? There's going to be a day of judgment, son, and I'm telling you, everything's going to be revealed. And all the hidden things that have been behind the scene and all the little committee meetings they've had plotting against you, all that's going to be exposed, and you're going to be vindicated, and God is going to smash all the bad people who have ever persecuted. Woo! Glory to God, give it to them. It's going to be the old Lazarus thing, you know. He was the beggar that was sitting out in front of the rich man's place, and the rich man didn't even give him a slice of bread, and when they all died, brother, hey, that guy went straight to hell, man, and he's down in hell burning good. He's down in hell burning. Say, oh, send that beggar with one little drop of blood to put it on my lips. No way, son. You're going to get what, hey, all is going to be revealed. Things are going to be cleared. Justice is going to come. Just hang on. Be courageous. They're going to get theirs. I like that. I can see that in the passage. And most of the Bible scholars agree with that and say that's the way it is. Therefore, all of this is going to take place. And what's it based on? This persecution thing. But I got a problem with it. I don't have a problem. I have a problem. Big problem with the whole thing. So I don't know. You'll have to make up your own judgment and let the Lord speak to you. But I got a problem and a difficulty with that concept. I not only have a problem with the concept, not with the concept, because the concept I think is true. Everything is going to be revealed. There is going to be a day of judgment. Things are going to be made right. Everything is going to be exposed. There isn't any question about that. But I'm convinced that's not what he's saying here. And I want to give you the reason why I think he's not saying that here. You'll note that immediately after verse 23, where he ends up the persecution deal, he stops with the persecution language. When they persecute you in this city, flee to the other, for assuredly. Then he starts in this language. Look at verse 24. A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for a disciple that he be like his teacher, and a servant like his master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more will they call those of his household? Now, those two verses we spent last Saturday night on, so a lot of you didn't get in on that. But those two verses are focused entirely on being, I was going to say like, because that's the translation there, like his master, but that really isn't a very good translation. The Greek word for like there is ginomai, which means to become, and has the idea of a state of being. So it's not act like Jesus. It's not take on the actions of Christ. It's not WWJD. That's not it. It's not imitate Jesus. That's not it. Can we go beyond that? What would Jesus do? Can we go beyond that in our thinking? The whole essence of the passage is, be the same as he is in a state of being. Here is a state of being in which Jesus dwelled. That had definite ramifications in what he did. I understand that. But it wasn't what he did, it was the state of being he was in. Because the interesting thing is that if you give a man, if you take on the rule, if you take on the activities of Jesus, you may do some things that Jesus did in the wrong time, at the wrong time, in the wrong place, and get into and be wrong in doing it. For instance, maybe in a certain situation, Jesus wants to shed love through you, and in another situation, and in that situation, instead of shedding love, which would be the result of the state of being, here you are in a state of being that's just exactly like Christ, and in that state of being, in this circumstance, you would share love. You may say, I'm going to imitate Jesus, put a cord together into a whip, and walk in and clean house. Well, Jesus did that. He didn't always do that. Does that make sense to you? So it isn't about the activity activity that Jesus did. It's about the state of being that caused the activity. So the whole idea is be exactly like Jesus is in the state of being, which is all about inside you. This is a different generation, folks. This is a different culture. This is a different setup. We've got technology. We've got all this stuff. You just, come on. We got to get into the state of being of Jesus so he can spill into our cultural environment. It's exactly what we need. There are not enough pages to make enough rules to get you. It's going to take a state of being so we can walk into a situation and be exactly like Jesus is inside and know what to do. That's what he's calling us to in the passage. Be exactly like Jesus. That's what's happening here. Now, after he said, be exactly like Jesus, then he says, therefore, do not fear them. Now you say, well, them refers to a person. I know, not a state of being, I understand. But you see, the Greek word for them is artos, which can also be, it's in the third person plural, which means it could be not they, it could be translated them, but it could be translated it. So here's the principle, concept that I'm trying to give you, that you should be exactly like Jesus in the state of being in which he existed, in the internal fullness of the Spirit, in the indweltness of the Father, in intimacy with God. Dwell in that state and be exactly sourced like he is. Would you open yourself to Jesus like Jesus opened himself to the Father and be exactly like he is in your circumstance? Jesus filled you exactly as Jesus was filled with the Father, so that through you he can do exactly what he wants to do. And if you'll get into that state of being, you're not afraid, are you, to be like that? That doesn't scare you, does it? That this is not about persecution. Well, bless God, I don't need to be afraid they're going to get it. No, this is about, hey, be exactly like me in every circumstance that you're going to go through, which happens to be persecution. Be exactly like I am, but listen, you're not afraid to be like I am, are you? That's the difficulty of the passage. Now, there are three reasons why I believe that's the case. Number one is that this is a new section. Verse 24, 25, and 26 is a new section in the flow of the discourse. By a new section, I mean it's new language. We talked a little about this last Saturday, but again, for those who weren't here, you'll note back in verse 5, he's addressing the 12 disciples, the 12 apostles that he's sending out. He's giving them specific instruction. And he uses all the way through this, he uses the second person plural, which is you. Look at verse 7. And as you go, preach, saying, look at verse 8. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Provide neither gold nor silver nor copper in your money belt, nor bags for your journey, nor staff, nor workers, and so forth, into verse 11. Now whatever city or town you enter, inquire who it is that is worthy, and stay there until you go out. And when you go into a household, see, you. He gives that all the way through, clear down to verse 23. When they persecute you in this city, flee. I say to you, you will not have gone through this. You, all the way through. And then when he comes to verse 24, changes language. No, you. It's a third person plural, and it gives in my translation, a disciple. He's moved from specifically talking to the 12 apostles, which then you could say, well, I'm not one of those 12, so this doesn't apply to me. Whoa, wait a minute. This does apply to you, for he takes it in verse 24 and says, let me include all of you in this. A disciple is not a disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his. And he changes language here to include us all. We all are disciples. We all are servants in comparison to Jesus. So he changes languages. So I'm proposing to you that this does not relate back. The therefore does not relate back because he's changed language on us. It's whole new content. And the new content is be the same, identically the same as Jesus is in his attitude, in his inner motivation, in his state. What burns in his bones, let that burn in yours. Be like Jesus, exactly like Jesus. State of being. Now, a second reason why I believe this is the case of the passage is the fact that you'll note in verse 26, he says, therefore do not fear. Now, look down at verse 28. And do not fear. Look down at verse 31. Do not fear. 3 times he gives it. This is the first one, verse 26. Second one, verse 28. Third one, verse 31. Do not fear. But this is really interesting because in verse 31, do not fear, imperative, a command, a distinct, direct command from Jesus. Hey, this is not up for grabs. We're not going to discuss this. Do not fear. Verse 28, do not fear, imperative, absolutely imperative command. Hey, I'm commanding, look me in the eye, I'm telling you, do not fear. This is a command from Jesus. This is not up for discussion. In verse 26, not a command. It's in the subjunctive, which means it's maybe, could be, don't know for sure. He said, I don't know that you're going to be afraid. So verse 28 is all about what? I'm not sure you will be afraid. Maybe you'll be afraid. You aren't afraid, are you? Are you really afraid? Are you afraid to be like me? See the language. The whole tense is different, folks. Now, another reason I believe this is the case is that you'll note in verse 26, therefore do not fear them, for, it's the Greek word gar, it means cause, or for this reason. So I'm going to tell you, you're not afraid to be like me, are you? You're not afraid to surrender to me. Hey guys, come on. A disciple is not greater than his teacher. A servant is not greater than his master. You know me. You're not afraid to give your whole life to me. You're not afraid to just get intimate with me. You're not afraid to become so intimate with me that what's going on in me is going on in you. You're not afraid to become a vessel through which I can move through and make you exactly. You're not afraid to let me express myself through you. You're not afraid of that, are you? Well, you know me. Come on, guys. You're not afraid to do that, are you? No. If you are, well, I just want to tell you this. 4, you don't need to be afraid. 4. Then he gives this statement, which is the content of the passage. For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. Here's the reason you don't need to be afraid to be like I am. Here's the reason what's going on in me, you don't need to be afraid of that. You can have it going on in you. Here's the reason why all that's the resource that's flowing in me and all the intimacy I have with the Father and all the wonder of the fullness of the Spirit that's burning in my bones, you can let that just go wild in you. You don't need to be afraid of that, and here's why. 3 reasons. Number 1, live in a state. Now, look at this. For, verse 26, therefore do not fear them, For there is. I just laughed when I saw this. There is, in the Greek, is the third person, oh, this will turn you on, third person singular of ami. Ami is the Greek word I am, which is a state of being. That's the subject of the whole passage, the statement. The focus of the entire statement is a state of being. See, if Jesus came and said, be like I am, oh, brother, how am I going to do that? Have you tried? I can't. No, I can't do those kind of, no, you nail me and I can't do what he did. Can you do what Jesus did? Walk on water? No. That's not what he's talking about. This is about a state of being. So you don't need to be afraid to be like I am, because I'm not calling you to do what I did. I'm not calling you to do miracles. Get off that, will you? I'm not calling you to walk on water. Would you quit talking about that? I'm not calling you to hang on a cross. Get off of that. I'm not calling you to get 12 disciples and walk around the country. I'm not calling you to do that. I'm calling you to what's going on inside of me. The state of being that's in me. I'm calling you to that. You're not afraid of that, are you? What was that like? Isn't it interesting? Jesus started Matthew, his ministry, with the Sermon on the Mount. It was a manifesto of the kingdom. It was a theological statement, and when you get into Matthew, over here on this beginning end of his ministry is the Sermon on the Mount, which is the manifesto of the kingdom. And then at the end of his ministry, the last preached public ministry was in chapter 23, another manifesto ending his ministry. So there's two, and you can compare those two. It's a great comparison. But he started this ministry with a Sermon on the Mount, and you know what the Sermon on the Mount was all about? Telling you what he is, who he is, what he is inside. Look at the Beatitudes of the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit. That's me, Jesus says. Yeah, that's who I am. Did you ever see him when he wasn't poor in spirit? Did you ever see Jesus haughty? Did you ever see him flipping himself around and... Why didn't he do those kind of actions? That wasn't his state of being. Do you think Jesus disciplined himself? Say, don't be cocky now. He didn't have to discipline himself not to be cocky. Why? If anybody was going to be cocky, he could have pulled that off. And we would have about it and said, yes, yes. But he didn't even have to discipline himself not to do that. Why? Because it wasn't in him. That isn't the way the man thought. The Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are those who mourn. Wow. Blessed are the meek. Did you ever see Jesus when he wasn't meek? Even when he was strong with the Pharisees, there was a meekness to it. He could have nailed those birds, but he didn't. Why? Because there was a meekness that dwelt within him. It was a state of being. See, the whole Sermon on the Mount is just, oh, blessed are the pure in heart. That's a disguise. That's who I am. You're not afraid to be like I am, are you? Come on in. Blessed are the peacemakers. Why don't you just, some people walk into a room and it's just agitate. Everything's just upset immediately. Other people walk in and Jesus just walked in and why? It's a state of being. It's who he is inside. He went on in the Sermon on the Mount to say things like, some people stand up and say, I'm not a murderer. Let me describe myself to you, Jesus said. I don't even hate. Why would I want to hate? That's like saying, why don't you take a gun and shoot yourself in the foot? Well, why would I want to do that? That's a dumb idea. I know. Why would you want to hate? Do you think hate hurts the person you hate? What does hate do? Kills you. So why would you want to hate? Just isn't in my makeup. Just doesn't dwell within me. It's a state of being. You're not afraid to be like I am, are you? Come on. That didn't scare you, does it? To have the same kind of intimacy with me that I've got with the Father, and to let the Father flow through me. Oh, let me flow through you like the Father. Come on, get into that state of being. So you know how they say, well, I've never cheated on my wife. Jesus said, I don't lust. State of being. Why don't you lust? No satisfaction in it. Doesn't accomplish anything. It's a dead-end street. It's a cancer. Some people say, I always tell the truth when you put my hand on the Bible. Jesus said, I don't swear at all. I don't put my hand on the Bible. I just tell the truth all the time. That's who he is. Yeah, lies aren't going to come out of my mouth. Why? Because I got this state of being inside where lies, that's the devil's deal. The devil always lies. Why? Because that's his state of being. Jesus says, hey, I'm trying to describe to you who I am. You're not afraid to be like I am, are you? Come on. You're not afraid to be indwelt like I'm indwelt. Sermon on the Mount. It's a description of who he is. Listen, they come up to you and hit you here. Hit me here. Turn the other cheek. Jesus, what? That's the way I am, guys. But if you do that, they'll take advantage of you. I know. Isn't it great? But you don't know. I don't. None of my business. It's a state of being. It's who I am. This isn't the Old Testament law and says guys, I can't help myself. It's an inner state of being. You're not afraid to be like I am, are you? Why would you be afraid to be like I am? One of the questions that's always come up on this issue is, how far do you go? Let's turn in the other cheek. Now, come on. Just be practical. How far do you go with that? Yeah, they hit you here. You say, okay, hit me here. I'm willing to go along with that. But the problem is, if they hit you here and you let them hit you here, then they'll hit you here, and then you hit you here. And then when do you say, don't hit me again? Go the second mile. I know. Okay, I go the first mile. I'm obligated to do that. But I'm such a nice guy. I go the second mile. And then they come along and say, hey, how about the third? Would you go the fourth? Would you go the fifth? When do you suddenly say, hey, carry your own stinking packages? Where do you draw the line? Jesus says, you're not afraid to be like I am, are you? There is no line. Why would you want to draw a line? Why wouldn't you just keep pouring your life out? Why wouldn't you just always want to be redemptive? Well, I heard this preacher say, bless God, if you don't come to the altar tonight, you'll walk out of this door and probably get hit with a train. Because God's had it with you. Well, God's never going to have it with you. What are you talking about? Why? How do you know that? Because that's just not in Jesus. One day God's going to wipe his hands at you and say, I've had enough. No, he's not. Where did you get that? Do you ever see that in Jesus? You folks are awful quiet. Did you ever see that? No, you've never seen that in Jesus. You mean God is going to hound me all the way to hell? Yes. You mean if I step through the gates of hell and burn forever, I'm going to have to walk through his blood? He's going to be saying, don't go. Why? Because it's the way he is. What can I say? That's his state of being. You're not afraid to be like him, are you? Don't be afraid to be like him. Come on, just turn yourself loose and just be filled with him and just get into the state of being. Know the. Don't be afraid. Well, why shouldn't I be afraid? Because you're going to live in this state of being. Second reason. You're going to live without secrets. Do you see that in the passage? We're back to Matthew chapter 10, verse 26. For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. You're going to live without secrets. How do you know? You're not afraid to be like him, are you? Jesus kept secrets. Excuse me. Got this terrible kink in my neck. Probably need to go to the chiropractor. You know why I have this kink in my neck? Because I'm always looking over my shoulder. See who's watching. Because I don't want, some things I don't want. I got secrets. Do you know what it is to live without secrets? Never have to conceal, hide. Oh, had to change churches. You know why? Yeah, they know too much about me down there. Isn't that neat? No secrets. Live without. That's the way Jesus was. There's no secrets. Now in the passage, it's really, the grammar of the passage is really interesting. There is the subject. Now, the verb is will be revealed, and hidden, and will not be known. Will be known. Those are the two verbs. And the words covered and the words hidden are participles, which are adjectives to the subject. So here's what you got. Here's this state of being, and in this state of being are all the things that are covered and all the things that are hidden. And in this state of being, once those things get in this state of being, you know what happens? They're revealed. And they're known. You're not afraid to do that, are you? Take your whole life, all the secrets. bring him into this state of being, and let him be they're known anyway. Come on. Come on. Do I have to confess everything to God? He already knows everything. Duh. So what is hidden anyhow? So if you think you got secrets, would it be all right to come to Jesus and say, and get that all off your neck? And be like him and live with no secrets? Oh, it's so great to live without secrets, wouldn't it be? Oh, let me quickly. Live without sham. That's in the passage. Oh, look at it. For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. I looked the word up, sham, up in the dictionary. It's something false, something that's false, that says it's genuine, but it's not. It's really false. It's what we would call hypocrisy. This was interesting to me. Do you realize in the scriptures the word hypocrite or hypocrisy is only used 18 times in the New Testament? Every single time it's used in the Gospels, and every single time Jesus is the one who uses the word. The only one who ever talks about hypocrisy in the New Testament is Jesus. And he was death on it. Isn't it interesting? Oh, here they're dragging her. They're dumping her. They're wiping their hands. They're grabbing their stones. They're looking to Jesus for instruction to stone the woman caught in the act of adultery. Jesus is so kind. She's filth. Jesus is so loving. She's dirty. Jesus is so caring. She's pathetic. Jesus is so forgiving. The same Jesus marches into the temple, looks those religious, you are of your father the devil, and would not tolerate the hypocrisy, religious hypocrisy, for one split second, and poured his life out for all the riffraff of the community. Aren't you glad you're riffraff? Wouldn't it be so, you're not afraid to be like him, are you? State of being. Whew. No secrets. No hypocrisy. No cover-ups. No play acting. No trying to look. Not trying to impress anybody. Just like Jesus. Afraid to be like you. Yeah, I'd be scared to death to do the things you did. If you're calling me to the kind of lifestyle activities that you, oh, I'd be scared. I'm not into that taking coins out of fish's mouth. I think I'd rather get a job. But Jesus, what if being like you is really a call to a state of being, that what was going on in you could go on in me. And the way you were inwardly is the way I am inwardly. And that would somehow affect my cultural environment of this generation. Yeah, it wouldn't be like way back then. It would look entirely different, maybe, in outward activity then than it does now. But you could literally affect my generation. Because who you are is here, indwelling me, living in a state of being. Don't have any secrets. And there's no hypocrisy. Could I tonight, oh God, take everything that's hidden, everything I've tucked away, everything I've buried, all the hatreds and all the upsets that I've just pushed away, and all the stuff I've rationalized myself through, and all the hurts, all the bitternesses, and all the garbage, all the abuse of the past, and all the resentments, and all the broken relationships, and all that stuff. Could I just bring it into this state of being? And could it just all be unraveled, revealed in you? And I could live without secrets. And I could live without sham. Be like you are. If anybody here tonight, oh God, has fear about that, if they're afraid to get into being like you are, if they're afraid to have your heart, if they're afraid to be possessed with your mind, if that scares them, don't know if it will, but if that scares them, God, please wrap your arm around them, dear Jesus, tonight. No secrets. Just open. And if we're going to be sheep in the midst of wolves in this community, this is the condition we're going to have. Holders open. Moments of response. Don't hide. Don't be afraid. Don't put on a show. Just let him give you his mind. Let him give you his heart. Quit looking over your shoulder. No secrets. Moments of seeking.